All right, we'll go ahead and get started here this afternoon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monthly meeting of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment. This board has the power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear and make decisions on requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, to review conditional use permit requests, and any appeals from the decision of city staff in the administration of the zoning ordinance. The members of this board are citizens of the City of Des Moines and have been appointed to this board by the City Council. The board members are volunteers and receive no compensation for their public service. I'm going to take a moment to introduce our board members present today. First of all, on the audience's left is Justin Gross. Next to him is Marlis Jones. On the audience's right is Dave Gare. Next to him is Rhonda Cedillo. And I'm Mel Pins, the board chair. I'll introduce city staff who will be assisting us today. First of all, our legal counsel for the Board of Adjustment to my left is Gary Keidlock. I'll introduce city staff who will be presenting and assisting today. That includes Frank Dunn Young, Senior City Planner, Bert Dross, the Deputy Planning Administrator, and Eric Lundy, Zoning Enforcement Officer. I'm going to cover our meeting's procedure for today. For some of you, this may be your first time in front of the board. You may hope it's your only time in front of the board. But we'll take everybody through this. I'll explain how the hearing works, but we'll help you through when your agenda item comes up. So don't be nervous on process or procedure. We'll help you with that. First and foremost, the Zoning Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial board. This hearing will be conducted within the procedures and the format is authorized by Iowa law and this city's ordinances. This meeting is open to the public. The meeting is being recorded by both audio and video for a legal record of these proceedings. The board members have each received a copy of the agenda and the staff recommendations. This board is required to base its decision on each item upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case has been identified in the written staff report. If the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrates that the criteria established by law for granting the relief has been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the requested relief. Each item will be announced in the order that it appears on the agenda. Items that are listed on the consent portion of the agenda, which is the first section of the agenda, are not planned to be individually discussed today. Rather, they will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report, unless the appellant does not agree to the conditions that have been recommended by staff, or if there's an individual present today in the audience, or a board member that requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda, so that a full discussion on the matter can occur in the regular hearing process. So we'll come back to that consent agenda in a minute, and I'll kind of take a poll here just to make sure if anybody has concerns, then we'll hear the case formally. For our regular agenda, after an item is announced, city staff will first give a brief overview of the appeal. They will present any written comments that have been received prior to the hearing. Then it will be the applicant or their representative's turn. They'll be allowed up to 10 minutes to present the reasoning for their appeal. We will then move to the public comment portion of the hearing for that agenda item. Anyone wanting to speak in support of, in opposition to, or even in neutrality of the requested appeal will be allowed up to 5 minutes each to present their comments. This will be their one and only opportunity to address the board regarding the item at hand. Once all concerned citizens have spoken, the board will then ask any additional questions of city staff. Lastly, the applicant will be given 3 more minutes for a rebuttal or other closing comments if they so choose. All speakers must speak only from the podium here at the front center of the room. We got a little display there, and then you see the microphone. They must begin their presentation by first giving both their name and address of either business or residence, as appropriate for why you're here today. In the event that you may need to be contacted for legal notices related to the outcome of this appeal. All speakers are requested to remain courteous and to focus their comments only upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Speakers are asked to ensure that they're respectful of time considerations and, if necessary, The board chair will limit further comments by a speaker if they exceed their time limitation. The board chair will then close any further public comment on the agenda item. The board will immediately deliberate the request and will make a decision on the appeal. Please note that it takes at least 4 affirmative votes for any zoning appeal to gain approval. And we have a 5-member board here today. We're a 7-member board. We don't always guarantee that all board members are here, but with 5 members present, it will take 4 to approve your item. So if you feel like your item's maybe a little controversial or your Vegas odds might be better if there were more members here, you could ask that your item be deferred to next month when we get to your item. But generally speaking, if you think you got a good reasoning for your appeal and you can convince us, at least 4 of the 5 of us today, you can give it a shot. So if anybody feels like they'd like to have their item continued to the next hearing date, just mid-December, we could certainly do that. So we'll come back to that in a minute. If your appeal is approved today, we ask that you wait until at least 1 week from today's hearing if you need to contact the city's Permit Development Center to obtain any necessary building or sign permits that would be related to your appeal. This will allow the decision of the board to be documented in the form of a decision and order, which will be provided to both you and city staff. Any appeal that is approved by the board must be implemented, constructed, or otherwise utilized within 2 years of the date of the decision by this board, or such approval shall expire. The decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Iowa District Court. So if you feel you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, you may petition the City Council to change those regulations for future considerations. Any material written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation is part of the permanent record. You may contact city staff after the hearing if you need a copy of anything presented. And if you would be presenting anything that you haven't already given appropriate copies or digital files to city staff, you'll need to do so. Couple housekeeping items. Please avoid any undue conversation in the audience so as to limit distractions during the hearing that is in progress. Everybody's doing a fine job. Also, please ensure your cell phone's been silenced. Great job so far. And if you need to use a restroom, you can leave through the doors here. You don't have to go downstairs. Go past the staircase. Restrooms are on your left. If we would need to take a break, we'll do so around 3 o'clock for about 5 minutes. And once your agenda item is completed, you're welcome to leave the hearing. So that's our background on everything. So we're going to take a look at our agenda here today. We don't have any changes on the agenda, but items 4 and 5, or item 4 has been rescheduled to the December 21st meeting. Frank's just going to put that up there quick. So if anybody's interested in item 4, that's been rescheduled to December 21st. So we'll go back here on our consent portion of the agenda. It looks like we just have one item. That's a conditional use request in the vicinity of 205 East 18th Street. And city staff is recommending approval of that, subject to some staff recommendations. So I'm just going to poll the audience here. Is there anybody opposed to granting the conditional use requested in the vicinity of 205 East 18th Street? It would relate to use of a tenant bay for native beer warehousing and distribution. If anybody would be opposed to us granting that approval, just raise your hand for the moment. Seeing none, anybody here on the board with any concerns or questions about that item? If none, would there be a motion to approve item 1, which would be the consent agenda? All right, moved by Marlis, second by Rhonda. All those in favor of granting the conditional use request, raise your right hand, say aye. Motion carries 5-0. So if you're here for item 1, that was on consent, you've been approved. All right, we'll get a copy of that to you next week for the record. Okay, this will bring us to our regular portion of the agenda. The next item is related to the vicinity of 1626 Dixon Street. It's a conditional use permit request. This was continued from our meeting from last month, and so we'll have city staff give a brief explanation of this one, and we'll let them kick it off when they're ready to go.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Frank Dunyoung, planning staff. The item in front of us today is located in the vicinity of 1626 Dixon Street. It is a request for a conditional use. The proposal is expansion of existing 1,340,000 approximately square foot concrete batch plant to include an area of approximately 58,000 square feet for bulk material equipment storage with 9-foot, 3-sided loose material covered shelters, parking, and access drive. And so a conditional use is required for a fabrication and production intensive use in an I-2 district. And so the subject property is zoned I-2, industrial use. It's located along the north side of East Washington Street, which is Washington Avenue, which is down here, Dixon Street along the east. The expansion area would include an area that is along the north and the side here. It contains an existing 9,160 square foot building, which houses the office, laboratory, and production. And so here is a view from the south looking into the site. And here's a view from looking west into the site. This would be the southwest portion of the site. And once again, existing operation more north central of the site. And this would be the area that is where the expansion is being proposed. And so as you can see, this is their existing facility as it is today. Over here is the cell tower that was mentioned. You can see the cursor there. The expansion area is going to include area along here and in this area where the bulk material storage would take place. No production would actually take place as part of that. There would be some parking improvements, access drive improvements. We'll go ahead and scroll to the next, to their actual layout plan so you can see what is existing and what is proposed. So the purple would be existing, the green is what is being proposed for those storage areas requiring the conditional use. And here is another diagram. And so the applicable criteria for approving the conditional use. Sorry, I passed it. It's actually starts up here. And so one of the things to note regarding the conditional use is they are also asking for an exception which would allow the proposed material storage shelter heights to be 3 foot taller than the maximum 6 foot that is allowed. So any loose material is generally required to be covered with a shelter on 3 sides, and typically that is 6 foot. However, they are proposing the 3 foot in height. So it'd be a total of 9 feet in height. I will also note that there are some existing storage areas that are legal nonconforming that are taller than 9 foot that were previously allowed. So there is no change proposed there. And so staff believes that the applicant has satisfied the criteria for granting the conditional use as long as the business operates in compliance with recommended conditions. The proposed location and operation activity adequately safeguard the health, safety, and general welfare of persons residing or working in adjoining areas. The property use would not impair an adequate supply of light and air to surrounding properties. It would not unduly increase congestion in streets or public danger of fire, safety, or flooding. The proposed use would also not impair established property values. It is consistent with the general purpose of the zoning ordinance. The impact of the proposed expansion will be minimal since any expansion of the use shall be in accordance with an approved site plan, which would ensure that drive aisles shall be paved and any outdoor storage areas shall have a dustless surface. Further, the applicant has satisfied the criteria for granting the type 2 zoning exception of 3 feet over the maximum 6 foot in height for the loose materials stored. It will be set back a distance from the property line. The applicant faces a practical difficulty given in the limited size of the expansion and the area needed for site improvements required by code. The shelters would not significantly create adverse impact on the essential character of the surrounding area and surrounding property and would not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property or unduly increase congestion in the public streets. It would relate to a use classified by applicable district regulations as either a permitted use, a permitted accessory use to the district. And so staff is recommending approval of the proposal for the conditional use and the request for the type 2 zoning exception. And here are the conditions. And here is the consent map. We received a comment from one comment in approval. Actually, we received a couple comments approving it, or in favor of, sorry. And here is a summary of the neighborhood meeting that took place. And this is the neighborhood meeting invite. And then list. What questions do you have for staff?
Anyone? I think you've covered it pretty good there, Frank. The as-is pictures of the facility, it looks like they've already made some nice improvements with fencing, landscaping, but there's the one driveway that I think is the south secondary drive by the cell tower, that's currently gravel. That's going to be replaced with concrete for approach, apron, and into the site a fair distance. Is that correct?
That is correct, and so that is the access drive that comes
Yep.
off of East Washington Avenue.
Yeah. So my biggest concern is usually gravel that gets over the public sidewalk or washes out into the street, and then, that causes stormwater issues and jams up stormwater outflows. Okay. Anybody else have anything else for staff? Okay. All right. Thank you, Frank. Okay, so at this point of the hearing, we'll turn it over to the applicant, if somebody from the applicant side wants to come up. And I do apologize, maybe not a big deal, but as I said, with only 5 members present here today, you got to convince 4 of us at a minimum of your request for your appeal today, your conditional use in this case. City staff is recommending approval. We don't always have to agree with city staff. We have to have our reasoning if we don't. But if you want to continue to proceed, that's great. If you'd rather wait till next month, we can also do that. I can't ever guarantee that we'll have a full board of 7. So if you think you can convince 4 or 5 of us, go for it. But you don't have to tell me that. You want to proceed?
Yeah, we can proceed.
Okay, great. All right, you got up to 10 minutes. Just give us your overview.
All right, thank you. Frank, can I use your mouse here? Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, legal counsel for the board. My name is J.D. Dalton, Dalton Law Firm, 2521 128th Street, Urbandale, Iowa, 50323. And I'm attorney for the applicant, Liberty Holdings, Inc. I think Frank did a really good job summarizing the proposal and what we're trying to do. I actually started working with Liberty on this back in July, and you pretty much nailed it, Mr. Chairman. The core improvement here to the neighborhood is this piece right here. If I go to page 2, you can see this right here, this little square, was basically city right-of-way that has never been improved. So when Liberty's trucks come into this plant, they're exiting right here, and then you've got a 75,000-pound truck going across limestone. It generates dust. And so we actually, in the neighborhood meeting, we had neighborhoods, most of the participants, actually all the participants were residential property owners, and that was their primary concern all along, was can we do something about that? So back in July, we reached out to city staff, and then ultimately appeared before planning and zoning and city council, and have gotten unanimous approval on all of this, which is conveyance or vacation and conveyance of the 3 parcels. So there's a parcel here, this parcel here, and then up above this Jefferson piece. And the dust really is just here because everything else is paved. So when we're paving city streets or DOT highways, you got to have everything on pavement anyway because of contaminant issues. So in terms of dust being generated here, it's just a non-factor. So once the city council understood that we would be paving that, it was a unanimous decision. We've also negotiated easement agreement with the cell tower and with the property owner over here, where Liberty is essentially going to be taking over 100% of the maintenance costs of that going forward, and to make it easy to get this thing through. The type 2 exception that we're asking for, if I go back to the, it's on next page, yeah, right here. Okay, so if you look at the existing heights, these bins here are storing inert material. So you're talking rock, sand, stuff that's in Iowa. The limestone bulk bins is the same limestone road that's on all our county roads, so there's nothing out of the ordinary of anything that's being stored in here. And historically, as you pointed out, the site was actually updated in 2019. And so there really is no height restrictions on this blue area. But the green area, and the reason why we asked for a continuance last month is because we knew we would be losing quite a bit of storage in this area because of the turn radiuses of the trucks coming in. So when we looked at Chapter 134 versus 135 outdoor storage requirements, that's when we discovered actually there's a height limitation in Chapter 134, which is what's in front of you. So in talking with city staff, we said if we can at least get that to 9 feet, we think we can make that work. And so that's what we're asking for, is a 9-foot type 2 exception to keep the material stored at 9 feet. If we didn't have some of these turn radius issues, you know, and even this area here, which our engineer shows, that is currently this blue or purple color, that's going to be, we're going to be losing some of that. So kind of when you weight it all out, you're trying to preserve as much as you can. So yeah, I think this has probably been the least controversial project I've ever had. We've got unanimous support from the neighbors, unanimous support from P&Z and City Council, and so now we're in front of you. I guess I'd turn it over to any questions you might have directly for me.
Questions for JD? Well, I'd say if you've come this far since July, you're doing pretty darn good. So that's,
well, Eric drives a pretty hard whip. You know, you want to get going, but we were talking with Eric. All right. Well, thank you all.
Sure. All right. So for the next part of the hearing, is there anybody that wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request? If so, please step forward. Seeing none, anybody in opposition or in neutrality? Just with related comments. Seeing none, any further questions for staff? Eric, need to say anything? No. Any questions for staff or Eric? No. Okay, we'll close the public portion and go to board deliberation. Yep. Okay. All right. Clear enough. Would there be a second? Second. All right. Motion by Marlis, second by Rhonda. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Say aye. Okay. Motion carries 5-0. All right. We'll have a copy of that decision in order by about this time next week for you for the record. All right. Thanks for coming in, guys. Thank you. You bet. Okay, so just for clarification, so our next item is item 3. It's a conditional use and variances request at 2515 East Euclid Avenue. As I mentioned, there's just 5 of us here today. This is there are 7 members on this board. We can't always guarantee all 7 members are here, but it always takes 4 members to grant an approval. On item 3, I see staff is recommending denial. Our board is here with open eyes and ears to hear a case. But if the applicant would feel like they would like this to be continued to next month, if perhaps there's 6 or 7 of us here, the applicant can request that. But when we get to next month, if somebody has surgery, goes to Mexico for a trip or something, I can't always guarantee that we'll have a 7-member board. I'm just saying. It could happen. So who's the applicant here in this case? Do you want to go ahead and hear your case today?
Yes, sir. I'm fine.
Okay, all right. He says he's fine. All right, well we'll have, if you say you're fine and you want to hear it, go ahead and sit down, because we got to have Frank give a quick summary first.
Oh,
okay? Yeah. All right, it sounds like we'll go ahead and proceed then. Frank, you can give us a brief overview.
So the property is located in the vicinity of 2515 East Euclid Avenue. The applicant is proposing use of a 2,183 square foot tenant bay for retail sales, limited use with sales of alcoholic liquor, wine, and/or beer. As a retail sales limited use, no more than 40% of gross receipts from sales can be derived from the sale of alcoholic liquor, wine, beer, and/or tobacco products. The tenant bay is within approximately 432 feet of an approved liquor store located at 2456 Euclid Avenue. I'll show that in a photo here in just a moment. And within 480 feet of a place of worship located at 2559 East Euclid Avenue. The appeals that are being presented include the conditional use for the retail sales, limited use selling alcoholic liquor, wine, and/or beer for off-premise consumption in the MX3 district. It also would require variance of the provision that requires any retail sales limited use in an MX3 district selling alcoholic liquor, wine, and/or beer to provide at least 1,320 feet of separation distance from any store, that is, any liquor store engaged in the sale of alcoholic liquor. Variance of the provision that requires any retail sales limited use in an MX3 district selling alcoholic liquor, wine, and/or beer to provide at least 500 feet of separation distance from any place of worship. So those are two variance appeals in addition to the conditional use. And so the subject property is approximately 41,000, just over 41,000 square feet. It's located, as you can see in the photo, south of East Euclid Avenue, mid-block in between East 25th and East 26th Streets. The property contains a 4,428 square foot building right here that has 2 tenant bays. Part of the building today is used as a laundromat, and then the other portion is vacant. That each half is approximately 2,183 square feet. The property is located just across the street from Hy-Vee grocery store, and then we have Hy-Vee Wine and Spirits, which is difficult to tell in the photo, this photo, but it's also within 500 feet of the Experience Church to the east.
And Frank, sorry to interrupt, but the Hy-Vee Spirits or whatever, is it attached or in the Hy-Vee grocery store in the CX, or is it at a different location?
It's in a different location, and this should show better.
Yeah.
And so the premises that we are talking about is in the photo. It's right here.
Okay.
This is a it's a south-facing view. So it's Hy-Vee is down at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
The Hy-Vee Wine and Spirits which is not yet up and
Okay.
running, but they received their
That's-
conditional use in February.
That's where Joanne Fabrics used to be, right? Does that sound?
I believe so,
Okay,
yes.
Yep. Old timers know this stuff. Yeah.
And then the
There's
Experience
Chinese restaurants in there. Yeah. Mhm.
Experience Church would be, if you were to pull in this
Uh-huh.
drive here and go left, it's right here.
Is that in the old Slumberland furniture?
Yes.
Okay, again. Okay.
Before that, was it a Hy-Vee?
Yes,
it
it
the
was.
old- It was the old
They
Hy-Vee
had a nice lunch
location.
counter. All right.
And so the MX3 district requires, it does allow for limited retail sales use, but you must obtain a conditional use for the sale of alcoholic liquor, wine, and beer, as well as it requires the separation distance of a light facility, which is 1,320 feet. That light facility, meaning a liquor store, a fuel station selling alcoholic liquor, wine, and beer, or limited retail sales use selling alcoholic liquor, wine, and beer, as well as the separation of having 500 feet from a place of worship. The MX3 district would, there is the requirement that limited retail sales use would have no more than 40% of the gross receipts from sales on the premises being derived from those liquor, beer, wine, tobacco products. Couple images that I want to show. Another aerial, more of a closer view of the property. This would be a south-facing view. And this would be facing southwest. This would be a front view of the property. And so the place of worship would be to the east, and the liquor store is northwest of the property.
So Frank, this looks like a pretty new development. Has there been any tenant in that bay to date? Is this brand new?
The development is a couple years old.
Couple years.
I'm not certain that there has been a tenant.
Okay.
I would ask the
Sure,
applicant
yeah.
to expand on
Thank
that.
you.
And this is I'll zoom out a little bit, the proposed layout of the limited retail sales use. So you can see they have refrigerators along the front and side here, liquor shelving, counter register. And here are the criteria that the board must consider for conditional use. And I will scroll through them. If I need to back up, please let me know. And as I get to the criteria for a condition, or for the variance, I'd like to reiterate that it is to establish an unnecessary hardship, a property owner must demonstrate the proposed sorry, I hadn't made it there yet. The property owners must demonstrate that the property cannot yield a reasonable return from any use permitted by the subject zoning regulations. So failure to yield a reasonable return may only be shown by proof that the owner has been deprived of all beneficial or productive use of the subject property. It's not merely sufficient to show that the value of the land has been depreciated by the regulations or that a zoning variance would permit the owner to maintain a more profitable business. They must also demonstrate that the plight of the owner is due to circumstances not of the owner's own making, which unique circumstances must relate specifically to the subject property and not to general conditions in the neighborhood. And they must demonstrate the use or construction to be authorized by the zoning variance will not alter the essential character of the area in which the property is located. And so one of the things that I do want to quickly mention that I glossed over up here is that if the property alone were a retail sales limited use, limited to the sale of beer and wine only, no alcoholic liquor, it would be subject to providing a 150 foot of separation distance from any place of worship, school, public park, or licensed child care facility. They'd still need to obtain a conditional use, but the variance provisions would not be at play.
Okay.
Now, if the board were to grant the conditional use, or the variances and the conditional use, the decision of the board would be sent to the city council for action. They could either take no action, in which in 30 days the decision would be approved, or they could make a final decision to approve, in which it would be approved upon their final action, or it would be remanded back to board for further consideration of criteria, in which the board's final decision at that time would become final. Staff does not believe that the application has satisfied the criteria for granting a conditional use for the sale of alcoholic liquor, wine, and beer sales as established in City Code Section 134-3.9.9. The proposed location does not satisfy the separation distance, as there is an approved liquor store less than 1,320 square feet, and there is an existing place of worship less than 500 feet from the site. The geographic location and operation of the activity would not adequately safeguard the health, safety, and general welfare of persons within the surrounding residential area, as it is not sufficiently separated by distance, landscaping, walls, or structures. Furthermore, the proposed use could diminish or impair established nearby property values and have a detrimental impact on the use or enjoyment of surrounding properties, as it would create a concentration of alcoholic liquor sales. Furthermore, staff does not believe that the applicant has satisfied the criteria necessary for granting a variance to separation distances for limited sales retail use with alcoholic liquor, wine, and beer for off-premise consumption. An unnecessary hardship has not been demonstrated, as the land in question can yield a return from the uses permitted on the property. There are multiple uses allowed within the MX3 district, and once again, it is not merely sufficient to show the value of the land has been depreciated by the regulations, or that a variance would permit the owner to maintain a more profitable use. Staff has recommended denial of the conditional use and denial of the requested variances. Here is the consent map. It does show a few property owners on the south edge within 250 feet, as well as here are comment cards. We did receive multiple comment cards, as well as multiple emails in opposition to the request.
And Frank, I see what looks like two neighborhood associations. Does this touch boundaries or right on the cusp of one to another neighborhood?
It does. It's
Okay.
within the shared Douglas
Oh,
and
okay.
Fairmont Park, and both neighborhood associations have presented opposition,
Okay.
which those are the two that were in front of us there,
Got it.
as well as we do have a letter that was submitted. This is the call-in opposition. These are the emails.
guys good with pan and scan there? Okay. Thank you, Frank. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Were there any in favor?
Any in favor? No, there were not.
Okay. All right.
And here's
Oh, we
a
got
summary
meeting summary, okay.
of the applicant's neighborhood meeting. What questions do you have for me?
Questions for Frank? Frank, just, oh, go ahead. No, Justin, you first.
Okay. Frank, I think you mentioned the Hy-Vee liquor store there. Is that liquor store within the 500 feet from the church as well?
No, the separation, I don't recall if that was in the,
Yeah, and I guess I forget about how some of the Hy-Vees work. If they've got the separate liquor store, do they sell some alcohol in the main grocery store yet?
I'm guessing they do, but the Hy-Vee liquor store was actually approved back in, I think it was February of this year, so they're just now getting ready to open.
Okay, so they received a conditional use and a
Yeah.
variance.
Yeah, and so they met the separation distance requirement because they were at least 500 feet from
That's what I
the
was
church.
asking. Okay.
So nothing we needed to do?
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
All
That's all I was just asking. Thank you.
And Frank, too, kind of to springboard off that a little bit, a lot of the folks mentioned the Walgreens, and I wondered about that, too. It would appear to me that's within a distance separation, but does the Walgreens not sell hard liquor, or is it large enough it's not considered a liquor store? Can you give us some angles on that?
yep, so there's different classifications for the
Right.
size of retail.
Yep.
And the Walgreens is the Walgreens and I guess the Hy-Vee directly, those
Sure.
would be considered a large retail.
Okay, okay. So the
Sales.
separation distance isn't required from those, is that correct?
It's not the same. I don't know what it is right off tip.
It's not?
There is no separation
Yeah.
distance.
Yeah, I just know that, the neighbors say, gee, there's enough alcohol available for sale, but even though those neighboring businesses sell alcohol, the separation considerations aren't necessarily on the table then,
Yeah.
from those uses.
And so you can see in this table right here, it talks
Oh, here
about the
we go,
differing
yeah.
retail sales uses. And
I'm not sure we can see on the table, but I can tell there's a table there.
Oh,
That's more me than you.
well, it looks a little fuzzy to me.
Yeah. So, yeah, large retail sales, right? They're general, okay. Much larger, okay. Okay, but the Walgreens would be in general, and so, yeah, no separation. Got it. Okay. And Frank, kind of generally speaking, there's obviously at least two variances on the table. Variance test is kind of difficult. This involves alcohol. Is this something you sit down with an applicant, kind of explain, hey, listen, this isn't allowed by the code? If you want to bring a case to the board for an appeal, you can, but, I'm assuming you explain kind of the gravity that this isn't allowed.
Yeah,
right?
I've had multiple conversations with the applicant regarding the situation and then the proximity to both the liquor store and the place of
Okay.
worship. so.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I know once in a while there might be some innocuous use and there's some surprising zoning code at the end and it catches people off guard, but this is something that, was anticipated or came up early on in the discussion about the use, right?
It has, and
Okay.
I made an effort to also reach out to the applicant regarding some of the opposition that
Okay, all
they're
right,
likely to see.
appreciate that. All right, anything else for Frank? Okay.
Yeah, just-
Yeah, Justin.
Sorry to go back to this. I'm looking at this, the table again, the applicable. So if they had limited just wine and beer sales, if they didn't do the alcohol, then there wouldn't be
The
any.
liquor.
Huh?
If they didn't do the liquor, the
If they didn't
alcoholic
do the alcohol
liquor.
liquor, yeah. If they didn't do
Right.
the liquor, then there wouldn't be the 300 or
1320,
500 foot and the
yeah.
1320, right?
That is correct. They wouldn't have the separation distance would be limited to 150 foot from a place of worship, daycare, school, park.
Okay, yeah, it's a good observation.
And they would meet that requirement as it is today.
Okay. Okay. All right, well, thank you, Frank. Okay, so now the applicant can step forward, and the applicant can give us their reasoning for their appeal and their variance requests, along with their conditional use. All right, sir, we just need, again, your name and whatever address is relevant for you,
Okay.
and you can have up to 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair, the City of Des Moines, Mr. Frank, and everybody, the officer. So, I have been doing this kind of business around the Des Moines area and West Des Moines side and Waukee area.
And what's your name again? I didn't.
Arjun.
Arjun?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
All right, go ahead.
And then I thought that it's a good business opportunity in that area because it's a good traffic. And I've also did a little bit of geographical study. I found like it's a sound area. But I know the outcome now. I'm a little sad, but it's the law and it's the requirement. So I upheld the law moving forward and try to find another place for the opportunity.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with us, or
I
would you
really
take
don't
some
have
questions?
I really don't have anything at this point.
Okay, all right. Well, Frank does a good job of kind of giving the background and kind of laying the issues out. Questions for Arjun? Yeah, was there another tenant in the space you're looking at now? This is pretty new construction. Do you think you'd be the first one?
Yeah, I believe this.
Okay.
I be the first one because
Okay.
there was another like a laundromat or something like that.
Was that actually in that bay where you're going to go in now?
No,
It was
it's
next door?
2 unit. One side is the laundry thing. The other
Okay.
side it's very new. Even they don't have the.
Yeah, so it's all been bare. There's been nothing in there. Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What hours are you going to be opened?
I was thinking of doing 8 to 10.
I'm sorry.
8 to 10. 8 in the morning and 10.
Till 10 p.m. at night. Okay. All right. Couple related questions. It looks like you kind of drew a floor plan to show your shelving and your coolers.
Yes, sir.
You know, the requirement is that if we were inclined to improve this, only 40% of your gross receipts can come from
Yes,
from
sir.
any kind of combination of alcohol and tobacco.
Yes, sir.
And it looks like, 60% plus of your shelving and cooler space would be related to liquor and alcohol. And that's usually the most expensive stuff that a store sells. So it doesn't look, to me, it doesn't look as much like a convenience store as it would look like, gee, it's a place for liquor and beer. So how would you look to be balancing where the majority of your sales are supposed to be from other things?
Yeah, because like I said, I already built this kind of cooler at West Des Moines location. It's a little bit expensive, like around 60 or 70,000. And once I build the cooler, then I'm not required to keep the small cooler. I can put the other kind of liquor within the same cooler. So that's the reason I said walk-in cooler for beer, juices, non-alcohol
Right.
thing. Yeah.
But that walk-in cooler is about the length of your entire building bay there, right?
Yeah, I was thinking like just doing half shelving liquor and other for beer and wine.
Okay, yeah. It just seems like you've got a lot of product for only
Probably,
40% of it.
this is actually me drawing at the last moment. I did
Okay,
not do a
okay.
great job or something, but yeah.
I just look at what I see. So.
Yeah.
The more clearly it's presented, the better
Yeah.
we can understand what you're doing. And the board's not here to help you with your business plan, but,
Yeah,
you got a Hy-Vee across the street that already
Yeah.
sells alcohol. The Walgreens does. There's a Hy-Vee liquor store. There's other ones. You're not selling gasoline. So why would somebody come to your store first?
Yeah, the first thing every time, like it's not as busy as Hy-Vee, would be like a very slow.
Okay.
And the first priority would be the customer service.
Okay.
The second would be the like variety. Like we can have combination of different things. We can even have from Minnesota vendor and also from Nebraska supplying different drinks, energy drinks type of thing. And sometimes, like even talking about the beverage, we can get a deal. So that we are not any doing competition with Hy-Vee, but there are a few areas we can go cheaper. That's the only reason.
Okay. But it sounds like you're still talking about alcohol here. So since 60% of your sales have to be like bananas, potato chips, bread,
Yes, sir.
you're going to be competing again with the Hy-Vees and the Walgreens that sell that and other convenience stores.
Yes, sir.
So-
That's the reason I'm saying I would not be able to compete with the actual hard liquor, but sometimes I could do well with beer, beverage, and other things.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Any other questions for Arjun? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You can go ahead and sit down. We'll check back with you in a few minutes here on this. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request for the variances in the conditional use? Seeing none, is there anybody here to speak in opposition to the applicant's request? If anybody wants to speak in opposition, they can either step up or just raise your hand. Come on up. You're the only hand that went up. We just need your name, address, and you can have up to 5 minutes to express your concerns.
My name is Charles Cole. I'm the lead pastor at Experience Church, 2559 East Euclid Avenue, formerly known as Slumberland and Hy-Vee. I also own a small business, though, a commercial maintenance company here in Des Moines, and so I have a heart for small business. I love small business. I have lived south of Chicago, went to college out in Oregon. I've lived in 3 different communities in the state of Iowa while pastoring. I do a small business because I didn't take a vow of poverty when I got into ministry, and so I need the money. And so I have a heart and a soft place for Argent and his desire to have a small business and accomplish the American dream that all of us want. However, and I know it's only 20 feet, but we already have Hy-Vee across the street. We already have Walgreens. I have a young gentleman here with me that's a part of our grounds crew that he comes almost every week and picks up stuff. And I would say over half of what is picked up on our property is the alcohol and the tobacco packaging and wrappers from Walgreens. And every time we open our doors, we're pulling something out of our west entrance that is something that we believe is destructive to people. We know that you can do that in moderation, but it's also one of the leading causes of a lot of things that are wrong with our society. And so while I understand small business and I'd love to see the economy grow in our area, just don't believe this is the right location. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your, yeah, you got a question, Paul? No, okay. Thank you, Pastor. Anybody else to speak in opposition? Step on up. We just need your name and address for the record, and you got up to 5 minutes.
All right. My name is Carter Hexamer, and I am a frequent attendee at Experience Church on 2559 Euclid. So I do come in, I wish it was weekly. I don't get out there nearly that much. But I do come in for the grounds crew, and I do pick up the discarded cigarette butts and the alcohol bottles when I have the time. And also, many of my family members, my dad attends that church with me, and he has also struggled with addiction. There's a lot of temptation there, and there's a lot of places around that area that already sell the alcohol and the liquor, and it's just, I think that our community could benefit from something else occupying that space rather than another thing that could potentially harm our community. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming down today, Carter. Anybody else to speak in opposition? All right. Seeing none, anybody speak in neutrality? All right, seeing none, do we have any further questions for staff or our zoning enforcement officer?
Does Arjun get to come back up and?
He will, yeah. I'll see if we got any questions for staff first. Eric, do you want to add something? Come on up if you do.
Eric Lundy, Zoning Enforcement Officer. I guess I did want to make sure it was understood, while Hy-Vee's Wine and Spirits location has not opened its doors,
Right. Yep.
from the application of the ordinance, we're considering it something that does need to be separated from, because it was approved by the board, and it still has its 2-year time frame to
Yep.
be exercising that relief.
Is that right?
And so from the intent of the ordinance, if we had something starting up every month, but we didn't separate it because it hadn't established, I think we would be going against the intent of that separation provision. So
Yep.
the interpretation was that we do need to separate from
Yep.
that location.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it not only has precedence because it was approved, but yeah, that in essence, the use is in effect in principle from a zoning ordinance, even if it's not open yet.
Correct.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Now, if they failed to
Sure.
exercise their
Right.
decision and order within 2 years,
Yep.
then that might be something that disappears in terms of a
Right.
separation.
Right.
So-
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Okay. Arjun, you can come back up if you want and give a closing statement for up to 3 minutes if you want. If you don't want to add anything else, you don't have to. It's up to you. You're good? Okay, all right. Thank you as well. All right, we'll close the public portion then and go to board deliberation. Any initial thoughts?
Chair,
Yeah.
so the two variances are kind of bootstrapped to the conditional use because of the size and how it's the feet between locations, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So if he was inclined to just sell wine and beer, he wouldn't have the variance issues, is that right? And then we're just addressing just the conditional use.
Right.
If that was the
I believe in that case, with the distances, that would be correct.
Okay.
Yeah, just be a conditional use consideration. Is that right, Gary? If he wasn't selling the liquor, the alcoholic liquor, if it was just beer and wine, the 1320 would be off the table, and he'd only need to be, what, the 150? Yeah, 150 from the parks, daycares, places of worship. And it would meet that.
I believe that's right.
Yeah.
I want to double check with our staff.
Yeah. Okay. Now, did you guys, and I know we're kind of closed, but did you guys maybe make that clear that, hey, listen, if you weren't wanting to sell liquor, if it was just beer and wine, a few minor convenience goods, you wouldn't need as heavy of a lift?
We did have a conversation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. And the only reason I'm asking that, since we're closed now, is because that came up as a related thing, and I just want to make that clarification. If anything, that's a benefit to the owner here, that everybody understood what's on the table. So, and I see a couple of things here with, we not only have the conditional use, we always want to make sure that alcohol sales are, I'm not saying they're complementary, like, blue goes with yellow, but they're not distracting to anything. And certainly, we understand that separation distance for things like places of worship, parks, daycare. But in this case, the zoning ordinance is separation from the other liquor stores. That's about density. That's about not having too many of these all clustered in one area. I think that was the intent when the council put that ordinance together. So it is a little bit of, some separation from other uses that wouldn't be, complementary, such as place of worship. But certainly, in looking at a district or an area, it's that density of liquor sales. And in this case, it looks like, this would be adding to the density of liquor sales already available with the one that the ordinance is particular to, that's already approved. So I definitely have some concerns with that. This is a building that is relatively, it's almost brand new. I always think of pre-COVID, post-COVID, there were a lot of things that have happened in the last 2 years I didn't notice. So we have a brand-new building. This wasn't a liquor store before. There wasn't alcohol sales here in the past, and maybe just closed down for 6 months, and, oh, shucky darn, we got to look at this again. It was built as an open bay tenant building, so I would think that there could be 1,000 uses that could go in there. It wasn't built just to be a bay for a liquor store. Kind of a heavy lift, as a variance test is.
Yeah.
So,
And I take a lot of stock in what the neighborhood
Mhm.
says.
Yep.
You have two neighborhood associations here that are against it.
it's a good point.
We've had several, I don't know how many we read through,
Yep.
right, of opposition, so.
And as the East Sider on
Yeah.
the group.
Got your mic on? So we want to hear this. Yep. On that density issue that the ordinance applies to with the radius, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, yep, I got you. Well, if there's other discussion, great. Would there be maybe a motion one way or the other here?
I would move that we deny the conditional use and the requested variances.
Okay. All right, so we got a motion by Marlis, we got a second by Rhonda. All those in favor of denial of the conditional use and variance request, raise your right hand, say aye. Okay, that motion's denied, 5-0. Arjun, we'd like to see if you could make this work somewhere, but I don't think here is the place, so I'm sorry. But I'd encourage you to work with staff if you see other locations. They can help you with that table and matrix and the separation distances. But I do appreciate you coming in, and I wish you well. You bet. Okay, that'll bring us then, item 4 has been continued to our December 21st meeting. So we'll move on then to item 5, which is a conditional use permit request in the vicinity of 20 East 18th Street. And again, we'll have Frank kick us off with some background.
Yeah, the item 5 is within the vicinity of 20 East 18th Street, and it is a request for a conditional use. Mr. Holt is asking for expansion of existing business that involves outdoor storage of inoperable equipment constituting a junkyard and dismantling and recycling of equipment and waste material to include approximately 22,122 square feet of additional area. The existing operation is allowed by a conditional use that was granted on May 22nd, 2013, and further amended on April 26, 2017. The appeal is for conditional use for a junk and salvage use in an I-2 industrial district. So I'll present some site photos real quick to kind of lay out the presence of the building, of the area. And this is the, what would be the south side of the facility along East 18th Street. More of a straight-on west-looking into the facility from East 18th Street. This would be from the corner on East 18th Street and Court Avenue. And looking southeast along as we travel west on Court Avenue. And these are photos of the existing facility along Court Avenue. And then this is the area that we're getting into where some of the expansion is to occur. We'll have an opportunity to see an aerial that kind of highlights this once again. And these photos are looking directly east. And so here is the existing facility as it is today. It contains two buildings totaling 12,040 square feet used for office and dismantling and recycling operations, as well as the additional undeveloped land. The subject property is zoned I-2 Industrial District. It is a 7.71 acre property, and it is located in an industrial area west of East 18th Street in the vicinity of multiple east-west railroad lines. I don't know if you can see them. You can kind of touch on those down here, as well as low-density residential area to the north and west, beyond these, further to the north over here. See if I have an aerial, that and residential area being up here. And so here is the new facility as they're proposing. And so the actual expansion of the conditional use is going to extend along here. And it's an L shape. You'll see it better in the image, but I wanted to talk about and show you what the ultimate proposal will look like when they're completed. Here is the dismantling facility, rebuild facility, and then there's some parking, and then obviously site improvements with paving. Dismantling operation will be taking place in this expanded area. So existing facility once again, and then this is the area that we're talking about and is in front of us today as part of that expansion. And so there's the history that I mentioned previously about Board of Adjustment, where they were granted the conditional use in 2013, and then further amended in 2017. They did have some enforcement action in early part of the year, April 22, for noncompliance with the site plan. They have come in and rezoned the property as recently as August 22nd, where they rezoned a portion of the property from N3C neighborhood district to the limited I2 district in order to have that expansion of their junk and salvage use. So the criteria for the board to consider: so as mentioned previously, the proposed expansion includes dismantling and recycling operation, outdoor storage of inoperable machinery, and multiple site improvements, including paved access drive with site improvements. The applicant is also proposing an additional building that would be used for the recycling proposal and a parking lot in future phases. I did want to make note that the remainder of the site not covered by the proposed conditional use would be held to the limitations of the zoning district in place. And so staff does believe that the applicant has satisfied the criteria for granting the conditional use as long as they operate in compliance with recommended conditions. The proposed geography, location, operation of use or activity adequately safeguards the health, safety, and general welfare of persons residing or working in adjoining surrounding property, so long as the site is developed in accordance with an approved site plan that satisfies the applicable standards, Code Chapter 135, and zoning conditions in Ordinance 1646. That was recently approved in August. The proposed use would not impair an adequate supply of light and area to surrounding property. It would not unduly increase congestion in the streets or public danger of fire safety or flooding. The proposed use would not diminish or impair established nearby property values. The proposed use is consistent with the general purpose of the zoning ordinance, the planning and design ordinance, Chapter 135 of the Code and Comprehensive Plan. Any specific purposes established in the zoning ordinance for the subject use. And so the impact of the proposed use would be minimal since it's located within a large industrial lot, is adequately separated from residential neighbors and by landscaping, screening, and distance. And so we do have a number of conditions in here that are specific to the property for recommending approval. I'll scroll through those. And a number of these first conditions are certainly part of the approval of the zoning, rezoning that took place. And here is a notice map of the areas that were noticed and then the comments that we received back. And here is the neighborhood meeting notice that was sent out by the applicant. Here's the neighborhood meeting summary. And this is a list of the attendees. What questions do you have for staff?
As Frank says, any questions? Okay. Just real quick, Frank, can you throw the site plan up there? Yeah, so some people were concerned about East 16th and what I saw as Vine Street, but it sounds like ingress, egress is primarily going to be Court Avenue and East 18th and not residential, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And maybe the applicant can add to that. I also see a couple oblong shapes. Are those stormwater retention basins?
Yes, they are here up to the, what would be the northwest corner. It is my understanding, and I would ask the applicant to expand on that.
Yeah, I'll have him do that when he presents, but
Yep.
just quickly, it looks like if those are stormwater retention and with some open space, that makes further buffers to the neighborhood then and separates the use a little more yet, correct? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Somewhere up there.
I've got it here. I'm just pulling up a presentation that Mr. Holt had sent.
You're finding the presentation, right?
Yeah, that I am.
We've all been there.
I have to jump.
Oh, okay. Tyler, can you go to commercial and put up a PSA or something here? Yeah. So, Mr., are you one of the Holt family?
I'm Tony or Anthony Holt,
So,
East 18th Street, Des Moines.
well, while Frank's trying to do this, it sounds like staff's recommending general approval here with some conditions, but again, there's just 5 of us today. You have to convince 4 of us. You think you can
We're
do that?
going to do the best job we can.
Okay.
We're in a
All right.
timeline, and we've been doing
Keep
this
it moving, huh?
about 14 years, so.
Okay. All right.
All
Well,
of
it's
you that
certainly
don't know
up
where
to
this
you.
property is, it's directly behind you.
Sure, yeah. While
Look,
Frank's looking for that, yeah, you're welcome to get started if you want. Go ahead.
How are we doing? I do have it in paper for them.
Uh-huh. There we are. I saw it.
There we are.
Cool.
There are little arrows to click through.
All right.
Okay, so to kind of clarify, this little stretch, as he pointed out, is the expansion. We currently have it. It includes the Vine Street right-of-way and these 2 lots. We've left this area here, which is over 100 feet, as a buffer. And then as the code points out, we have another 25 foot of green buffer that comes to the end of Vine Street. This is the site plan. As he said, this here, bottom is the top. We have a large retention. In those pictures he showed you, there was 2 houses that we demolished. We rented one of those houses on the corner out. One of our employees um, lived in it until we demolished it. And he used to come back in on the streets, come back and park in front of it and use his own restroom. And that's where part of this traffic back on Vine Street that's been noted by the neighbors, that should have quit about 6 months ago when this house was tore down. But we didn't clue into that until our neighborhood meeting, when we actually talked about the trucks and asked them if they had seen them lately, and they said no. So this is the site plan. The reason that we need to ask for this conditional use is that the DNR has come and said they would prefer us to do our operations in a building, and that we can control the dust in the building, we can control elements in the building way better, we can control water runoff. And so that's really what we're doing. But in order to do that, the trucks will drive, just keep rolling through here. This red is the second detention that runs along the railroad tracks. So the traffic pattern on the main streets, there'll be nothing back here on Vine. This section of here is a non-truck route, and so the trucks will actually enter here, come into the property, and exit on Court and go back to 18th. So there won't be anything up in the residential neighborhood. It'll be blocked. It'll be impossible for the trucks to go there. The on-site pattern here, which kind of explains it more, is the trucks come across, they weigh on this first scale, they come down, turn around and come back and come up this ramp and into the building, which so we don't look to have any congestion out on the roads at all with that 2,000 or 3,000 foot stretch. It should be fairly easy not to have any traffic backed up on 18th Street. And then when they exit, Court is a boulevard here. It'll force them to go that direction and back to Court. Back to East 18th and out. So the physical part of it will force traffic to stay out of the neighborhood. The building itself will be a very tall building with 2 layers, basically. You're looking at the top layer. Over against other recycling centers, we hope to enter in and dump our loads long ways, which is the same way as the trailers, and then exit at the far end of the building. You kind of get the idea by looking at this picture. The loadout trailers, semis will be here in the bottom, and the trash will be pushed into them and sorted, and we'll have 5 bays running across there. It only shows 3 doors, but there's actually room for 5 trucks wide. And the last 2 bays will be for stuff that's transferred to Metro Park East. And the other 3 will be for like concrete, cardboard, steel, shingles, and other recyclables that can come in and out. This picture shows a little where they'll be entering into the building. So then we get to a lighting plan here. The lights will all shine away from the residential houses. Everything will shine back in on the properties. Along that 16th where we'll have a buffer, this picture shows it the best, but this is 16th. We'll have a berm that runs along, a row of trees, and then also a fence. I do want to point out that we're only fencing to the end of Vine. It's about a 45 foot drop off the edge of here. We'll let nature take care of that if that's acceptable. This is a rear view from back here. So we'll fence along the railroad. will come up Astor Street to the hill again, and then there'll be a ramp up into the building this direction. We are also expanding at the same time our sale of the forklifts and trucks. And so we're a dealership, so we'll be using this for display area for the trucks. And this building here will be more for that. The front office will be used for a scale house for the exiting trucks. So that's kind of what it'll look like from East 18th, from Court Avenue. You mentioned there was 2 buildings on the property in a conditional use. There's actually 3 buildings on the property. This 3rd building is actually there too. We'll have dust collection in the building. We'll also have a boiler system to heat the building. There'll be fuel on site for the trucks and equipment. I have one other slide, if we can pull up this on the Zoom. Can we pull this up on the...
Cool. There we go.
So you'll notice that certain deadlines have been given. A site plan by December, approved site plan by March, and come into compliance by December 2023. We're hoping to do this in the 4 phases, and the first phase, where we're out of compliance right at the moment, is the red phase. We have a fence on it to slow the homeless down. We had quite a difficulty there.
Yep.
So we have no difficulty with that timeline as long as we understand that the red is what will be completed in that phase, and then phase 2 will be hopefully completed mid-2024, phase 3 by the end of 24, and then phase 4 end of 25. One other thing that I'd just like to point up, that Mr. Cruz, that we've spent a lot of time with, Mr. Joe Gatto, Councilmember Joe Gatto, actually came to our meeting at the first zoning meeting and worked with him, lives in this property here, and it's not within 250 feet of the conditional use side, but we chose to send letters out to our, we own the property all the way to 14th Street, so there's was a bit of a question of who you notified, but I think we over-notified.
Gotcha.
I think that's all.
Okay.
If that helps understand the
Sure.
project.
Sure. Pretty big project. Yeah. I'm assuming a few $1 million of investment here. Yeah. I was going to say, you don't.
I think we've been at it for 12 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Very impressive. Yeah. Questions from the board?
Well, we do multiple facets, and it's not all just here, but I think we're around 64 now.
Wow. And I just a couple quick clarification ones. You know, I'm familiar with construction, C&D waste, general solid waste, municipal solid waste. So do I understand that your facility might take in, like you rent or pick up roll-offs? Some roll-offs might have just trash, garbage in them. that gets sorted, it's going to Metro East, you're pulling out recyclables, salvageables. Is that what this facility will be doing?
That's right.
Okay.
I should have made that clear, but we're not,
Yeah.
we're not doing residential garbage.
Right.
We're not doing, we're not seeking a permit to transfer.
Transfer station, it's not transfer station, per se.
It is considered a transfer
Okay.
station by the DNR,
Okay.
but it's permitted only for recyclable DNC type materials. So if you
Right.
read what it is, we've kind of listed that out as shingles, wood,
Okay,
the general thing. It's not, we're not
Right.
talking
Yeah.
municipal.
yeah. So
Type.
the generators that have your roll-offs understand they're already doing a little source separation to begin with, and then you're further sorting that, separating that.
So the drivers will have to, in their best judgments,
Yeah,
give us this. The basis is we've really been doing this as a recycling center.
sure.
For 7 or 8 years,
Mm-hmm.
more than that, I guess, now. But in the picture of all that, the recycling side is what's listed. Like if you read what the zoning says, read what the code says.
Yep.
And the Department of Natural Resources would like you to reach 75% recycled.
Got it, of
It's
what
not-
comes through.
Which comes
Yeah.
through.
Yep.
And so what's happened in the city of Des Moines is we've seen a failure that was about where we're sitting
Yes.
over here.
Yep.
We've seen one up there.
Yep.
Because nobody can reach those numbers. It's
Right.
just impossible.
Right,
And so by qualifying as a recycling center / transfer station, then the DNR doesn't have to push us to that rule.
yep,
And then we can, if our numbers go higher, it's not an argument of, in practicality, or you can't afford to sort some garbage. It's just not
exactly.
going to happen.
Yeah,
But at the same time, if you allow us to do it, it's a benefit to everybody
Sure.
because
Sure.
we can run under these,
right.
we can keep everybody happy.
Yeah. And you know who your customers will be and what your expectations are of them for what they're generally sending
So
to
we've
you.
hauled,
Yeah,
I've run a roll-off company for 22 years. We do a large number of containers, and the drivers are just trained to know what can come in and what doesn't come in. And that's where I think we have an advantage over against opening your doors to everything.
Yeah.
You can't have everything.
yeah, because your driver could just take that roll-off directly to Metro East and unload their solid waste right in the landfill.
That's right.
Yep. Okay, all right. And are you okay with all the staff recommendations for approval there? I know there was quite a list.
As long as staff understands the phasing of it, is that,
Now, to what degree has that already been discussed with staff, though? I mean, for casual reference here today, oh, we're going to do this in phases, that might be tough for us to sit here and...
We'll expect the site plan to incorporate.
Okay. Do we need to draw any further attention to that? If the applicant has stated that would be part of their site plan submittal, can we leave it at that administratively?
When I get my chance, I'll look at it.
Yeah, we can come back to that.
Yeah, I think as long as we make a clear intent, whenever the vote takes place up here, we can incorporate that into the minutes and.
Yeah, I just, you know, not to speak for any of my colleagues here, but I don't want us to over micromanage certain aspects or phases, like, well, when is the cul-de-sac drive going to be done? I need to know. That's phase one. Well, I don't know how I'd set that on my own today, you know. If it has to be done within 2 years and there's 4 phases, well, got 6 months for each phase, see ya. I mean, I don't think that we want to sit and do that on our own. I think that should be something administratively. But we'll see. Eric, you can think on that for a moment. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, great presentation. Super project.
I just have,
Yeah.
at some point,
Sure.
in the previous conditional use,
Uh-huh.
we spoke of openings and sizes. When we discussed it, we said, okay, that's a site plan thing. I don't-
Openings and sizes of what?
Of the openings of the fence
Oh,
block,
as far as opacity?
so the conditional use has said 100 feet back, there has to be a fence. And if we go over what that fence represents, this is in the current conditional use, we had a 40-foot opening here. We'd be asking for additional 30-foot there, and we'd be asking for approximately 50 feet here. If we go back up to a site plan to help you maybe see this better. So currently, there's an opening by the scale here that was in a picture. There's another opening here that the trucks will exit at.
Sure.
Then there's a, sorry, get myself bearings here. There's another 40-foot here, and there's fences. And then we'll propose this fence goes all the way across, and then a 30-foot between that and the building, and then on the opposite side over the scale to this. And then there'll be a fence here that runs all the way to here. And then as we tried to point out, there'll be no fences over the hill. And then on the bottom side over here, we'll fence to the hill too, but there won't be a screening across the back on top of that tall ridge.
So on our docket today, we've just got, this is a conditional use request. No exceptions or anything like that on fencing or screening requirements were provided. So I would assume that's something that in finalizing the site plan, they could discuss or negotiate that administratively. Is that correct?
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's a difference in the timing when they got their last conditional use and then
Right.
the new ordinance is going into effect. And now we
Okay.
apply standards between different chapters.
And the site's going to be looking different than it was at the time it was approved before under the old ordinance anyway?
The board doesn't have the discretion.
Yeah.
on things that they did at the time of the last conditional
Exactly, yeah,
use, but
I've got you.
I can get into that.
Okay, yeah. All right. We good for your presentation? All right, thank you. Okay, anybody here to speak in support of the applicant? Seeing none, anybody to speak, and I'm sure you're supportive back there. Anybody to speak in opposition or neutrality? Seeing none, do we have further questions for staff? If we do, great. Eric, do you have some things you want to add or clarify? We'll give you that ability. Or opportunity, I should say.
So Eric Lundy, zoning enforcement officer. We have a couple of layers here. We have the layer of the zoning change, which had conditions to it, which are enforceable. And then we have this as a conditional use, which allows specifically the intensive activity. In addition to that, what Mr. Holt was speaking to was at the last time this was up for a conditional use consideration, you were looking at standards that were also in the zoning ordinance itself, which are no longer part of the zoning ordinance.
Right.
Those standards are, I mean, there's some very basic provisions in the code about absolute screening of outside storage and so forth, but in general, the standards of the physical development are now in the Chapter 135 piece of it. So I think the best that the board can really do there is to ensure that their use is in compliance with a approved site plan amendment for the overall site. The other thing that I think was suggested, and for his protection, if this gets granted, is that you might also put another stipulation that it be in compliance with any state license that's necessary for recycling waste transfer, so that, we want them to be in good standing, and if they fall out of good standing with the state requirements, then we want to be able to bring that back to the board for reconsideration as well, so. I think that's for our protection as the city, and it's also for their protection, because they know that they need to stay in compliance with state requirements to be in good standing with our zoning.
And you have that as a recommended condition. Is that item 15? Any junk or salvage yard requiring a license or permit?
Well, so we at the city of Des Moines have a local salvage license as well.
Well,
And that's actually,
Because the DNR, generally speaking, I don't believe requires licenses for junk or salvage yards. They
No.
require licenses for
I'm
solid
talking
waste.
about for recycling and waste transfer. So
Okay.
the other piece is they have they also need a dealer license for their forklift and
Right.
that as well. So that they're mixing a lot of activities here that are putting layers upon themselves. But, so there would be a local salvage license necessary, and then I believe the state needs our approval on a dealer's license as well, right? So they'll have a dealer's license for their forklift.
That's under DOT then.
Yes, so you have two state agencies involved here,
Yeah.
plus the city, so.
Yeah. Barbers also need licenses, morticians need licenses. You oftentimes
Are you cutting
don't.
hair over here?
Yeah. Yeah, I understand what.
Yeah, so I think.
I understand what you're getting at, but for the board to be able to articulate that within reason and kind of make it stick, we'd probably need a little help with that.
Well, I think, and certainly we can draft the order for you, but I think the intent would be that they would be in good standing with any state.
Yeah. 'Cause what does
Licensing
good standing mean?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
not in violation or
Well,
non-compliance.
that's easy to have happen. And I'm going to try not to get into my daily job.
But certainly if there's a pattern of that,
Okay.
then
yeah.
I think we would have the leverage then to
Yeah.
bring this
The Waste
up.
Recovery Authority has gotten notices of violations from
Yeah.
the DNR. Des Moines Waterworks has gotten probably an NOV.
Yeah.
I'm just
And-
guessing.
And I'm not trying to drag their compliance history
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
site into the
Yeah,
into
but
the
if we get
discussion,
into
but we do want them to-
litigation or something like that pile of stuff under the Southeast 14 viaduct that caught fire, where everybody abandoned it all and ran away, I know exactly what you were talking about there. We don't want to see that happen. I know that won't happen here.
Right, and I think all of this is coming about so that they can ensure that they stay in
Okay.
compliance, so.
All right. Yeah, well, we may need a little help with some language on that, if that's something we want to consider.
Yeah, and that really didn't come up until Mr. Holt spoke to that
Okay,
element, and so,
okay, I've got you.
just a thought.
All right. Anything else, Eric?
I don't have anything else unless there's
Okay,
questions.
any questions? Okay, all right, thank you, sir. All right, so Mr. Holt, you can close us out here. If you got a final pitch on anything or want to add any info, it's up to you. You don't have to say anything else, but you can kind of have the final say here before we go to our deliberations.
No, we just really want to say thank you. Thank you for all you do. We realize it makes a better city. Thank you.
And along the way, if you could convince the Iowa Interstate Railroad and the Norfolk Southern to fix the crossings at East 18th, that'd be great, because I'm sure that's hard on your trucks, too. I'm just joshing with you.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
It's, we've worked with the railroads quite a bit.
Jeez,
And
yeah.
we've worked with your neighbors. I mean, the new industrial plaza, and
Yeah,
the best way to get something done for to the railroads is basically give them something, otherwise forget it.
yep. I won't disagree with that. Okay, all right, well, we'll close the public portion and go to board deliberation. Any thoughts here, folks? It looks very impressive. This is more than, we've seen a lot of what I call salvage or scrap yards, but this looks like what I call 21st century reduce, reuse, recycle. It sounds like this is what we're trying to do here. And but there's a lot of site plan things that go with this. And as Eric mentioned, there's things we don't have jurisdiction over. This is the conditional use is our jurisdiction. Will it generally fit in with the neighborhood? Or at least be complementary, again, not cause undue congestion or diminish property values, air, light, noise. It doesn't look like there's going to be any of those impacts. They've accounted for that and how they've put together their operational and site plan, landscape barriers, stormwater control.
Chair, to the issue of the phases.
Yeah.
I mean, they have 2 years, right? Isn't that what usually they
That'd be
have?
my-
Is that, and that's flexibility enough for them to determine what is in their
Sure.
best interest to get,
Yeah, if you
and
don't.
when, right?
Yeah.
So I
If
don't
you
know
don't
if we
get
should
started
really-
for 18 months, you got to get a lot done in 6 months.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know
Yeah.
if we need to really tinker with that, do you?
I guess from my perspective, I wouldn't want to overcomplicate matters. If they say they need to do it in phases, I would hope that they could work with the zoning administrator and staff to, because I'm assuming that the city wants certain things done by certain time schedules. Is that correct? Without getting into discussion here. Just very briefly, Frank, can you help us with that? Why do we need to be concerned about if they need to do this in phases?
Part of the approval for the rezoning
Okay,
demonstrated, the conditions were that that the site would be brought into conformance with the approved site plan by December 21st, 2023. So that being a condition of the rezoning, they would have to amend the zoning to change that requirement.
well, as P&Z does to us all the time, well, then maybe they need to go back to P&Z and get that done, right?
And then to council.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would hope with everything, with what they want to do, with how the zoning works, that could be figured out. We have closed further discussion here. I don't know. I guess I'm looking to you guys too. I don't want to over armchair quarterback this process beyond, what's the intent of this? It's to have this transfer facility. How will it fit in? I think it's been shown. Is this a reasonable conditional use? Yep. At least to me, sounds like it.
So do we need a number 16, though, about the compliance with state regulations?
Well, if we want to turn the page and work on that, I guess, there's already an item 15 that talks
Right.
to about that to a certain degree. If that could be slightly amended to say, all appropriate permits, and I guess, Gary, you're our attorney, you're sitting on this side of the board. And as you well know, like with a driver's license, well, I can get a ticket, but does that mean I'm a bad driver and I shouldn't be on the highway? No, you got a ticket. That happens. That's different than, let's say, an order to cease and desist, or the DNR revokes a permit. If you don't have a driver's license, yeah, it got revoked. You better not be on the road. So at what level would we want to have that they have an appropriate permit and it's in effect?
I think, based on the discussion that I've heard, it sounds like the board may want to make that a little more general than it is written in number 15, which would, in a sense, make it broader to require appropriate licensure from all appropriate agencies for the activities being conducted on the premises.
Yeah, because I would say waste or materials because, again, I don't want to debate this, but any junk or salvage yard requiring a license or permit from DNR, we don't issue permits for salvage yards and junkyards. The DNR does not.
Isn't Eric asking that they just be in compliance with whatever these licenses are? And if they're not in compliance, you want to have some recourse. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they have to have a license to be in.
Right. Well, they're going to have the licenses. You want to make sure they're in compliance.
Yeah, the DNR only issues licenses for certain solid waste facilities.
I mean, I don't think we want to overthink this thing.
No,
This
that's
is
kind of what
this is a complex project. I think it's in everybody's best interest. If it needs to be phased, let's figure out how to phase it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only go so fast.
Right, and I think in these cases with this kind of stuff, be prepared to bring this to the board if you have those concerns and make that clear up front. But I know Eric said that, something was mentioned today about well, if we have this license or do it this way with this percent, we do or don't need this. And I don't want to get into a lot of detail with us here
Oh,
on
yeah,
that.
I mean,
Because we're not
that-
trying to do the state's job here.
There's tens of millions of dollars here.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to mess this up.
Right, right, no, and,
And, you know, in their business, time is money, and I think, so let's figure out how to make this easy and help them
Yeah.
succeed and not micromanage this
yeah.
deal.
Well, I think it sounds like if we would amend 15 a little to say appropriate licenses as needed with state agencies for the management or operation of materials handled, could we write that as part of the DNO with the intent of the board, and then either have it, like, bring it back, or would we need to do that? Because I don't want to get into hammering out direct language here.
Do you understand what we're trying to accomplish, Bert? Can you guys think you could work through that and accomplish that without us having to sit here and wordsmith this deal?
Yeah, yeah,
Like you said, with the coordinated required.
yeah. All I'll say, Mr. Holt, with our intention, does that seem to make sense to you?
I just want to make one comment.
Sure, yeah, go ahead and step back up. I'll let you do that here for courtesy for the issue at hand and the time you spent here waiting today.
So the purpose of phasing is for occupancy permits. So if we can finish phase one, get inspected, get our permits to that point and license to that point, and we can move on. But we all know that the best intentions of getting everything done in this current climate may or may not happen. And so my understanding earlier when we went to zoning was that was the purpose of saying phase 1, 2, 3, 4. That language was included in the zoning application.
Yeah. So then why would this board need to re-review that or make further statements on it?
Because in my mind, at council, it wasn't really clarified. It was
assumed?
It was assumed or whatever, right?
So this phasing doesn't show up in any site plans or schedule that has been signed off on by
So the
staff?
only thing that's been signed off on so far that I know is the two zoning that the council's done. One zoning went through with no consequences,
Okay,
which we agreed to go back to council at goodwill to get the consequences put on our zoning
yeah,
because they were forgotten by legal.
Okay.
So,
there, yeah.
but I just want to point out, we're not trying to work against
Oh,
anybody.
no, and we understand that.
And
too.
we're also
Yeah.
trying to put it into a phase where we complete this, we get it inspected, and that should give us our licenses, the start of our licenses.
Yeah. I guess in looking to my colleagues here, if this is part of the site plan, part of the rezoning requirements, all we're looking at for this board to look at is the use itself something that fits? Yes, it's zoned for that use, but still requires a conditional use permit. Or a conditional use, not a permit anymore, right? Yeah, just like taverns. In a general highway commercial district, a tavern's allowed with a conditional use. To me, that's all we're here to do.
Okay.
The final use for this, with the little turnaround road and how the trucks come and go and what streets they're on, is that going to affect congestion, density of the neighborhood, character? We've determined, it sounds like, at least in discussion, no. So I don't think this board's jurisdiction should be to, well, now how do we phase all that in to make the development work to get the occupancy permit? I don't think that's our purview. And I think, and Gary just showed me here, and it is on the record, the timetables through P&Z, the roll call with council, those dates were established for the project to meet for zoning. So if that needs to be changed or it needs to be amended, I think that's a P&Z issue. I don't feel that's an issue for us. We had a couple people in the past over the years that we said, well, you've got to pave that 200 feet, right? You guys have seen some of those with driveways and gravel, and they're like, well, I can't do all that at once. It's too expensive. So we did let them phase that in. But that was different. They were after an exception, or frankly, it might have even been a variance. But this is just, to me, does the use fit? And I think it does.
Well, Chair, let's move then
Yeah,
on
yeah,
approving the conditional use with some additional language that Bert's going to put in with
On the state license?
on the 15.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I would move.
You want to make that a motion? Is that
I
clear
would
enough,
second.
Gary?
I was just going to ask if you want to, there are timetables in some of those conditions. Do you want those to stay in, or do you want to take those out?
Yeah. A site plan shall be submitted no later than December 31st.
And though I can
You going to
tell
be able to
the,
do that? Yeah, thumbs up. Property owner shall obtain approval for that no later than March 31st. Okay, yeah. The property shall be brought into conformance with the approved site plan by December 21st, 2023, 13 months away. Is that where the issue is?
100%.
Okay.
Your language there is used way too much variance.
So,
Like, we can come into compliance on the part that they say we're out of compliance. In other words, we can fix this area that
and I guess just
Yeah.
for the board's information, the rezoning, the conditional rezoning that was approved by the council back in August contained those same deadlines. So if they don't comply with those deadlines, then they're subject to a rezoning to a less intensive use,
right.
which, may have the same effect as if
Yeah.
it was violated in the conditional use permit.
So with a project of this size and scope, why would someone ask for barely over a year to have the whole thing done, which is, it appears what this would have been?
I can't speak to that other than to say that
Sure.
was a
a little bit
condition, it was
rhetorical, but-
conditional rezoning that was agreed to by the applicant and staff, and
Okay.
P&Z approved and council approved.
So if we leave that alone and they can't meet it, they could go back to P&Z and say, hey, can you give us a little extra time here?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay. And again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you feel that's a better remedy than this board trying to dictate when all that's done?
I,
Because in essence, they have 2 years in our book.
I don't know that I can answer whether that's
That's
better
okay.
or not. That's
Okay.
kind of an opinion,
Sure.
maybe more of a policy
Sure.
question. I would,
But P&Z would have the authority to amend or recommend
right.
the date that the approved site plan must be brought into conformance with. They'd have the ability to do that, and council would review it and determine if
Make
they
its
would
own
want to extend it.
determination.
And I think that's
regarding the
Yeah.
zoning.
Because the parties agreed on that
Yes.
earlier on in this process,
Yeah,
right?
and it had nothing to do with us.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
But the dates are consistent.
right, yes.
They are the same
Here
dates.
Are consistent, yeah. Yeah. We're not trying to make this more difficult for you by kind of adding us into the
Can I
mix.
second Justin's
Yeah,
motion?
yeah. All right, so we're done with any further input, so Justin has a motion to grant the conditional use, subject to staff recommendations, and amending item 15 to relate to any necessary state permits, including any related to management of waste materials, solid waste, et cetera, right? Okay, and Marlis?
I
Yeah.
second.
Mr. Chair, could I ask,
Yes.
just for clarification, so that when we are
Yep.
drafting that, as far as requiring the licenses, would the board want that to say from, require all required licenses from any applicable agency,
Agency.
jurisdiction
I think
for
so.
all activities
I think
conducted
so.
on the premises, so that if they
Yes.
did start cutting hair, they
Right,
would have
exactly.
to get a
Exactly,
barber
exactly,
license too?
yes,
Is that
exactly,
is that what
yes,
the
yes.
board would like?
Or daycare with more than 5 kids. Yep, same thing.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. All right, Marlis, is that good for you? All right, so motion by Justin, second by Marlis. Good with our board attorney for our intent? Okay, all right. All's in favor of granting the conditional use permit request with the conditions as noted? Raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that carries 5-0. We like what you want to do. I'd say get get to it, if you need to look at changing your implementation schedules, you'll have to work with P&Z on that part, because that's part of the site plan requirement, and we don't have jurisdiction there. So, that's what we can do for you today. If you got other questions, talk to staff here next week when that D&O comes out. So, okay. We have two important things to do. Justin, I know you want to get on the road. We got two quick important things to do here. Okay, a proxy vote. One is just real quick. If you were here last month, if you've reviewed the minutes, are there any changes? If none, if you were here last month, would there be a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Marlis, second by Rhonda. All those in favor? We're here. Raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. So, real briefly, for a number of years now, there's been the city code relating to more things related to alcohol sales, what districts they can be in, separations, distances, things related to alcoholic liquor. Certainly beer and wine generally have alcohol in them. But we've seen in the last year, and including in even recent months, while we understand the intent of that, we don't want to have a liquor store every 500 feet on some of our major thoroughfares, but we've had some folks that I think have gotten caught up in the cogs. We had, Dave, you were here for one, but I think you missed another hearing. We had some restaurants that were next to a park, but at the far end of the park, they might have been an Austrian-German restaurant. Years ago, we gave them a conditional use to have beer and wine. It just required review by the board because of the separation distance to make sure it was going to be commensurate. But with the change in the recent law, nope, can't do a conditional use permit on a lot of these. It would only be a variance. Well, that's difficult to do. And we had a case like that on Indianola Avenue where, because it had closed for 6 months, they wanted to reopen. For a lot of restaurants, it'd be very difficult for them to say, sorry, I can't serve you a glass of wine with your Italian meatballs, or you can't have tecate with a Mexican dish. So we've had some folks that have gotten stuck in that. So as a board, about 3 months ago, we had said, could we ask city staff to review the ordinance and maybe make some reasonable changes where we could allow things like just beer and wine at restaurants or some of the limited retail sales places, just beer and wine with a conditional use permit, even if they're within that radius. Because right now the variance just cuts them off. And we had one restaurant that said, well, I'm going to have to close if I can't offer a beer with a meal. And it just seemed that the intent was good, but how it's carried out put a lot of businesses kind of in a bad place. So understanding some of our discussion, I drafted a letter. I had our attorney look at it to make sure that the way I was proposing this was clear. This wasn't about having staff agree or everybody agree. It was just, is what I'm saying clear for the districts that I noted? And I was listening with ears here to you all in putting this together. So what I'd want to do here, this was sent out earlier by Frank, so I just wanted everybody to look through it quick. If you concur with this, we would take an action to formally submit this through staff, and then they'd bring it to council. The impression is I think staff would be willing to look at it and maybe recommend some minor changes, but we fully understand things like alcoholic liquor. Yeah, nah, that probably doesn't make sense. If you can't handle a restaurant without a big mixed drink, well, sorry. So does anybody have any thoughts on that, or the draft letter? You feel that meets the intent of what our concerns were?
I definitely think it meets the intent of what we've discussed.
Okay.
I think it's excellent.
It's very well drafted, Mel.
Cool.
And,
wow, I'm not an attorney, so I'm flattered. But again, I made sure that our board attorney, I didn't have anything in here that was incorrect for districts or distances or things like that. But I think if we wanted to look at a site, if it was right next door to a child care facility, yeah, let's take a close, hard look at it. But right now we can't even look at it unless we give a variance waiver. And as we all know, the variance test is a difficult one. So, Okay, well, I don't have a direct time frame in there. This would just be if staff's doing reviews of the ordinance. I think they do that periodically. This is something they could work into that review. I don't know if it will help some of the people that recently were in front of us that maybe it didn't swing their direction.
Bert, do you know, when's the next review? I mean,
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah.
We're doing, or
Well, I'd like to, but
there's no timetable set for it, but I expect it would be next year, mid-year. We'll do a holistic review. We've been keeping a list of amendments to chapters 134 and 135 that staff would like to see. So, again, there's just a lot of other things that are taking up staff time now, but
sure.
I know it's on the agenda to.
Yeah, and if that's reasonable for our intent, yeah, we're not trying to get to the front of the line, but the floodway district thing, we reviewed that a couple years ago. You know, if you've got a business that otherwise exists, you should be allowed to have a sign on it. And I think, did you incorporate that into the ordinance already on that?
Yeah, that was handled right away.
Yeah, so we appreciate that. Well, cool. If everybody thinks that's okay, would there be a motion to approve the letter and forwarding this up the chain?
I so move.
Second. Okay. All right. Motion by Marlis. Yeah. Dave, you want to do a fourth? Yeah. Well, then let's make that official. We got a motion and a second. Marlis and Justin, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries 5-0. We appreciate everybody helping us take a peek at this. Okay. Any other business, Frank? Are we good? Okay. All right. This hearing is adjourned.